is chair of the Midtown CAC, and Christina Call is chair of the Northwest CAC. And Carol also has just finished her term as chair of the RCAC, which is all the CACs, so she can lend a perspective from that point of view as well. So yes, thank you. Take it away, guys.
Shall we just give it over then first?
Sure.
You want me to start?
You can start.
This is called freeform panel.
So we're depending on your questions
Yes.
more than anything else.
So we'll kick it off and frame what CACs are and what they do, and then maybe tell you a little bit about what each of our individual CACs, what they're dealing with, because each CAC is very different. So I'll just start at a high level and you guys jump in. Can you hear me in the back? Okay.
A little louder.
Louder? Okay. So I'm Carol Mayer, and I chair the 5 Points CAC, and 5 Points, thank you. We're not blinded there. That's better. I'm going to try to give you the parameters, but it's basically from the 5 Points intersection and then to the east. So down to Glenwood, Brooklyn, and up to about Anderson Drive generally. So if you're in that area, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. And I have some, I'm going to do my pitch at the beginning here. I have some cards here about how you can join our email list, which is the best way to stay in touch with what's going on. So aside from that, so there are 19 CACs in the city. I have to stand up. I can't do that. So there are 19 CACs across the city currently, and the CACs were formed in 1972 as a result. I may not say this technically, but there was a government provision that if we needed to get funds from the government, then the city had to have some form of citizen engagement and community outreach. And that's how the CACs were formed, in short. And so at the time, the city was about, I think we think it's about 100,000 people in 1972. And at that time, the CACs were really involved with the city groups, planning and parks and recreation and all of that, much more heavily so. Today, the city has staff for all of that. So the CAC role has evolved over time. So who are we? We're all volunteers, right? Every CAC has a officer structure, and we're all volunteers. There's typically a chair, maybe a co-chair, or a vice chair, and then there's a secretary and treasurer. And so those are the people who kind of organize the CAC. And then who's in the CAC, all of you are automatically in your CACs. It's not a membership thing. You don't have to join. You just have to decide you want to get engaged or not. So just by default of where you live, you're automatically in a CAC. So CAC stands for Citizens Advisory Councils. It's kind of an odd term, but the way I always describe it is we're a little bit in the middle between city council and the communities. So part of our job is to bring information out to the communities about what's going on in the city, right, big projects, as well as what's going on in our own communities. And then vice versa, the CACs are a pipeline for you to express any concerns, thoughts that you have about what are going on. And then we, the officers, who should be informed about everything to the best degree that we can be, can either help you solve that problem or we can direct you to the right people in the city organization to do that. So I'll give you an example, just one thing we're facing right now. We do everything from traffic, what's called traffic calming, how to slow traffic down. We work on a lot of what we call infill projects, so new houses that are being built in existing neighborhoods, and are they conforming with all the rules and regulations around that from the building code. 5 Points has probably the smallest amount of that. Patrick in his area probably has the largest, and you do too in your area, so you guys can talk about that. CACs meet usually monthly or bi-monthly. It just depends on the CAC. And each CAC, while we all operate under the same bylaws and conditions of our purpose and our vision and our mission, at the local level, we're all a little different. So what we focus on in 5 Points, you can imagine, is different than Patrick in North Hills or Christina in the Northwest, Briar Creek and that area. So, but the point is that we're here volunteering to serve you, right? We don't have agendas other than to bring information to the table. So what makes us most happy is when people get engaged and come to a meeting and say, hey, I have a concern about this, right? And then we can help you solve the problem. And one of the biggest, I think most important things that most CACs do is they get involved in the rezoning process. And I'm going to leave that to these guys because they're the experts in that. Cynthia.
Could you help me, and maybe some others who are not quite sure where the CSC borders are as overlapping with District E? Could you point out where your 5-foot CSC is with among, I know yours probably goes outside of maybe District E. I think that would be better.
We don't have a CAC map, do we?
No.
Just generally,
Just generally. Let's see how it works.
So Carol, your CAC overlaps with
Yes. So, for example, the 5-point CAC, we're in city council districts, we're in E, and our Hayes-Barton neighborhood is served by, actually, your district, District D, and all the rest of our CAC is in this district. So the CAC borders don't align with the council borders.
which
So
is
it's not a
somewhat
one-to-one.
confusing. I mean, I'm
It
actually
is
in District D. I live in District D, but I am also in the Way CAC, which is not here.
Right. Yes.
But a lot of my, a good number of my constituents live in District D.
Yeah, next time we'll bring a map that shows all the boundaries. It is on a website I can point you to, but your point is good. The CAC boundaries were drawn kind of in natural, how do communities cluster together. So for example, there's an Atlantic CAC, and around me, there's an Atlantic CAC, there's a Waterkey only CAC, which is our smallest one. There's a Glenwood CAC, and then they kind of wrap all around the city. The size of the CACs you would think might be the same, but they're not. So I think Waterkey is the smallest with about 3,000 people, and the largest is Christina's, and also, which is the northwest. Let me get around here. Glenwood. So Christina's kind of over here, and then this CAC here is called the North. Those two are largest. They have 80,000 people in them. And you say, well, how did that happen? Well, remember when the CACs were formed, this wasn't populated. Over time, and Patrick was one of the drivers of this, some of the boundaries got adjusted and new CACs were created. So these CACs up here are typically newer than the ones in the core of the city and in the south. So I'll just stop there. Do you guys want to speak about rezoning and then take questions? Or how would you like to do it?
Oh, okay, sure. My name is Patrick Martin. I'm chairman of the Midtown CAC.
Yeah, you have to speak really loud because it's hard to hear back.
Okay, Patrick Martin, chairman of the Midtown CAC. Maybe it does help to stand
It does,
up.
so.
Just and our overlap with District E is the part of our CAC that's inside the belt line. Our boundaries are Millbrook Road on the north, Lead Mine on the west, Crabtree Creek going diagonally from where Lead Mine hits the Glenwood, and all the way down to where Crabtree goes under Wake Forest Road. And then Wake Forest Road falls of the noose all the way back up to Millbrook. So, you know, we're kind of a triangular shaped or squash triangular shaped. We have about 18,000 people in the CAC at this point in time. It's growing constantly because of the growth of apartments in the Midtown area. So I know the census count, that was last official census count, was back in like 2015 or 16, and we had 16,500 people at that time, but surely it's up to 18,000 by now. Midtown is undergoing explosive growth and development, and so a lot of our time is spent dealing with rezonings, and that is citywide the issue that gets the biggest turnouts into the CAC meetings, because the city has had a tradition of wanting developers, builders to bring their projects to the CAC and explain it to the citizens via the CAC meetings and seek out their opinions. And it's not just yay or nay, but it's also very formative as the project evolves, because the citizens have great ideas about, like what makes the project work best in terms of conditions that can be added for, restrictive lighting, so it's not just lighting up people's backyards, but it points the lights at the parking lots or whatever. And ideas about where to place trash collection bins so that it's not waking everybody up, and the positioning and amount of windows in an office building so that people aren't, working late at night and looking down, at somebody's little girl's birthday party in the backyard of the house. I mean, those are all real concerns, and they get even more severe, things like stormwater control. We have people who are suffering from very bad previous planning on previous development, and it's not called North Hills for nothing. We have creeks that are down in gorges down below the surface of the streets, and you can't really tell it because all you see are the pine trees and the oak trees. But if you got close to the sidewalk, you'd look down and there's raging creeks after a rain. And so people's backyards fill up and people's houses get washed through, and so the neighbors in attending the CAC meetings have the opportunity to express their concerns and request things that can be done with planning of a development to prevent so much runoff, capture so much runoff, require higher standards for runoff. And, a lot of the developers understand this and get it, and they try to make adjustments in their plans. Not always, but frequently. So the CACs add a tremendous amount of value to the life of the city. And the topics are not just the rezonings, but then they do tend to revolve around, quality of life, ways of life, physical controls over how the urban environment looks and acts. So when we're not talking about a rezoning and the stormwater issues, we may just talk about stormwater and have the stormwater engineers from the city come out and explain what they do and what kind of programs there are. I feel like some of the work in our CAC led to the city expanding the amount of money that it grants toward ameliorating stormwater problems in different existing neighborhoods. Back in 2015, when we were considering Z 2014, and the zoning changes are numbered consecutively over the year, so 20 was the 20th zoning change request in the year 2014. And it was to remove 2 dumpy old houses on Six Forks Road and replace it with an office building on Six Forks is sitting up on the crest of a hill, and water all washes down into the neighborhood from there. And so one 95-year-old gentleman at the second meeting we had to discuss this topic approached the front of the room just before the meeting was to start with a gun and a holster on his side. And he's walking up, and I thought, oh my God, and my life is coming to an end because I'm chairman of the CAC, and people are, and he's looking at me and he goes, oh, you need to understand this. This isn't a gun, it's a, heart monitoring device. It's stimulating my heart, and I'm just like, oh my God, my heart doesn't need any more stimulating. But he was a retired professor from NC State, and he said, Capitol Towers and the North Hills office condos, when that was constructed, all of that water is washing down what's normally a dry creek in the backyards of the houses along 2 streets, and mine's at the bottom, and we need to address stormwater runoff because this office building is going to add to that. I said, you are so right. We held a meeting with the city council rep at the time and the assistant city manager and the stormwater engineers on a Saturday morning. Everybody that was interested, and it was mostly the people in that neighborhood, showed up. And we showed the stormwater engineers and the city council rep where washouts were occurring. The 2 ladies living across the street from this retired professor had to pay $45,000 of their own money to rebuild their land and replace a culvert that had originally been put in by the developer when the subdivision was done back in the late 1950s to feed into a creek behind their house. And that creek was caving in because of more water coming off of the Latter-day Saints church parking lot when that was expanded, and it washed down that creek. And there were, one of the gentlemen at the meeting said, you could hide an SUV in this creek. And I'm chairing the meeting and thinking, yeah, okay, well, we got to see this. And we went there on Saturday, and yes, indeed, you could hide an SUV in this creek. And he said, 20 years ago, you could step across the creek. And in 20 years' time, it had eroded so badly. It was at least 10 feet deep and at least 15 feet wide. And there were 2 trees that had fallen over just in the past year, fully grown trees, as the banks eroded. So anyway, I think as a result of that meeting, the city council changed the amount of money that was given to a program, which you all need to know about, in which the city will come and engineer and install or match grants from you to install something to fix issues of erosion and stormwater runoff that may be affecting your property. It's still not a cure-all for all of the issues in the city of Raleigh, but it's an improvement. So these are the kinds of issues the CAC deals with. Very serious, and it doesn't affect everybody, but you know, the issue that some neighbors have on stormwater may not be your issue, but maybe your issue is noise or unwanted commercial operations in your neighborhood, like gambling, you know, sweepstakes, and worse. So the CACs are very, very, very important to the city. And, pardon me?
Roadway projects too.
Roadway projects too. So.
Outline 6 Forks Road.
So I will shut up and let Christina talk, but, you know, ask questions.
Good morning. My name is Christina Jones. I'm the newest chair of ACAC, and I don't have nearly the experience that they do in all of these meetings. So what I bring and what I'm trying to bring to is including the younger generation, high school students, mothers, and parents, because when I go, I don't see a lot of us there. You know, there's not a lot of our people being represented. So my goal for the future is to how do we reach out? How do we outreach to people who may not always be able to attend? We have a live stream. I know we discussed last time not doing it, so we compromised and just done the presenters speaking. But it's a way to reach out to people who may not be able to come. So that's my goal in doing this. I do a lot of rezonings. I'm in that huge Northwest District, which does a lot. I think in last year, every meeting we've had deals with some sort of rezoning. Yes, ma'am.
I am in your CAC. I just discovered this about 2 weeks ago.
Awesome.
I've lived here 34 years. I live a mile from here. I have nothing to do with people in Briar Creek. Do you think that this CAC should be split?
You know, that has come up a few times in meetings, and it is something that I do think we are very, very large. So in the meantime, we don't really have, our turnout isn't very large. So at the moment, there's only between 10 to 40 people who come. So right
Because
now.
they don't know about it.
Exactly, and that's where we're trying to go. That's where I think we're reaching out. We want to do signs, we want to reach out to get people to come, and then once we have that influx in people attending, I think that's a better way to then present to the CAC, to present to council, to say, hey, there's too many, like, we should split. So at this moment, we're not, but that is something that as we get more turnout, that maybe we can look into. So I would love to see you February 13th at Lakeland at 7 o'clock. Yeah, awesome.
Do you have little cards like she does?
I don't, but I will definitely get one, and I will get your email. I'll contact you. Make sure that we reach out. So that's my goal. I don't have a lot of background in. I've only been doing it for a year, so I don't have the same background as they do. I don't have that to say, but that's what I'm going to do, and hopefully move forward and include more people. So,
I'm gonna pick up, oh, do we need to wrap up?
Well, I just wanted to say one thing. These three people represent three of the CACs that are at least partially in District E. There is a fourth one, the Glenwood CAC, and Greg Couric is the chair. He couldn't be here tonight or today, and neither could Linda Watson. But you know, if you're not sure what CAC you're in, you can go on the city website and find out, or you can ask me and I'll find out for you. You don't have to go to the CAC that you're assigned to. If you want to go to another one because they have a topic that's of interest to you, you can go. If they're voting on a rezoning, you won't be allowed to vote, but you can certainly attend. And I send out a weekly email where I list CAC meetings that are coming up in the next week. And so you can go on there, you can see what CAC meetings are up. It's hot linked, so you can go to an agenda and find out what's going to be covered at that particular meeting. But yeah, no, I think I just wanted to mention that, but you all go ahead, ask questions, and thank you.
We have some more time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's maybe another 5 minutes.
Can I just pick up on something you said there? I thought you were going to say, I've lived here 30 years and I've never heard of a CAC, because we hear that all the time. And it's not surprising because we're all volunteers, right? And guess what our budget is for the year? To get the word out to, what do we have? Getting close to 1 million people? $1,000. So we are very challenged in how we get the word out to citizens. And you might have seen, a lot of CACs have signs. I don't know. Tell me if you've seen a sign in your neighborhood that says CAC meetings coming up. Okay, great. So we've encouraged all of the CACs, well, I'll say in the past 2.5 years when I was chairing what's called the Raleigh CACs, which is the 19, one of our focuses has been you have to do more outreach, and we have to be creative in the ways that we do that, because we only have a $1,000 budget. And signs, for example, cost like $19 each, so it goes very quickly. But the best way, I think, is to reach out, see the map, find out what CAC you're in. Maybe we could send out a link to where the map is on the city website, and it'll give you the officers' names for your CACs. The best way is just call, email, text, whatever, the chair, and say, I want to get involved. I want to get information. How do I do that? Because each CAC is at different levels of maturity in their marketing. 5 Points has been around a long time. We have a very robust email list, right? So we send out information all the time. Most CACs have Facebook pages. Some CACs do Twitter as we're trying to engage the younger generation. Some, but not all, have email lists, so it just depends. You'll be communicated with as best the CAC can in the way that you want. However, that said, one of the things that we've asked the city recently is we really need the city's help in getting the word out, right? Through, maybe it's advertising, maybe it's radio, maybe it's newspaper, maybe it's email to the massive city email list. How do we let people know the CACs are there? So one of the best things you could do is go home and talk to your friends and neighbors. Say, I just heard about the CAC thing. Sounds kind of interesting, and help us spread the word, because it's exponentially better the more people that get involved to represent your communities. So that's my pitch.
I really appreciate the leadership that all of the CAC leaders are, the time and the work they put in. My concern is that the whole CAC structure is really not enough in terms of communicating with our local government. I've, over the years, sent emails and letters to members of the city council and city government, and other than from Steff, I have not received a signal acknowledgement of my communications. And I think I've worked in my, before I retired, I was Chief Medical Officer at Raleigh Hospital. I've been involved in the community health needs assessment and learned how much work it takes to really assess community needs and get feedback. And it takes those surveys, it takes focus groups, it takes many different ways. I don't see our city making the effort to get that. And that's very disturbing to me. And I understand that our city council members are given very few resources themselves for this. And I think that's something that's really ought to be corrected, not just to give more support to the CACs, but to do more. I think anytime a citizen writes a city councilman, they should get a response. They deserve that. They should be acknowledged, at least I got it. And that just isn't happening now. That's really sad.
I hear you, and I think maybe our city councilors can speak to that. I think they're next on the agenda. But one thing, I totally agree with you, and I think the current city council does too. The CACs are just one form of connection with the city, and that's not enough, right? And there is a program that maybe Kay and David could speak to, who are analyzing and looking into how does the city reach out more and get feedback, just like you're talking about. So I'll defer to them on that program. Yes, sir.
I wanted to throw out the second idea about the Northwest CAC being too large. Again, I think right now, right across the street, we're in the Northwest CAC, which extends all the way up to Briar Creek. There's zoning that has come up here, and it's not really very focused like some of the downtown CACs are much more neighborhood oriented. We had a rezoning case here, and there were people, nobody knows where they were from, voting on the rezoning case. It had no impact on people in Briar Creek whatsoever, wherever people were coming to vote for it. It just is a very large CAC. It didn't seem like people were completely neighborhood oriented or within the same neighborhood.
Right.
And one of the things I was going to say is that a lot of the information we get here is on next door.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been anything posted about any CAC meetings on our next door.
On your next door?
Right.
Yeah, which would be a way to get to people.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we talked about. Michelle right here, she's the vice chair. We actually discussed that at our last meeting. So it's definitely something we're going to begin implementing, but in the past it hasn't. So I definitely agree. Yes, miss.
I've been co-chair for 10 years at CAC. I have been to City Council asking them to separate our CAC. We have, like this gentleman right here, and this lady right here, and here, we have such a diverse, because what's happening, in my opinion, on Glenwood from Carmax to Briar Creek is totally different than what's happening from Carmax to Edwards Mill. What's happening from Edwards Mill to Carmax is infrastructure. It's the older homes. We're having traffic calming. We're having water drainage problems. We're having, I get sent to so many different things. We want to talk about the telephone poles. I got to go to the Duke area. I want to talk about the water lines. I got to go to the water lines. The city council keeps sending me to different places. I want people in this CAC to come out, like Christine said. We need, as one CAC said, we need to be separated, because we are not serving everyone like they should be. And this has frustrated me for 10 years.
Okay, wish you had been the chair before, because the RCAC body didn't have much engagement, right? However, we agree. Your CAC from, might not be pointing to the right place, but from Crabtree Valley Mall all the way out past Briar Creek, right? And this North CAC here, which is also huge, we've talked very much about they need to get 80,000 people, nothing's going to be in common between that person and that person. But I think the way to do it is the CACs need to make a proposal and take it to City Council and say, this is our concern, this is our recommendation, we need some assistance maybe from planning to carve up what are those new boundaries, right? And then the next thing is, let's say that gets approved, Now we have to go recruit some volunteers to chair those CACs. So you might be one of the next CAC chairs if you would be interested. But I totally understand and agree with you on the concern. But the step is really with the CAC body to take that forward versus somebody in the city solving it for us. They're not going to take that direction.
I'm trying.
We'll help.
Thank you.
As will Shelley Winters, who's the new chair of our CAC.
And who was going to be here today, but then wasn't able to at the last minute. Let's take one more question and then move to the next agenda item.
Very briefly, I just want to say that I appreciate this meeting, and it's an interesting exercise in grassroots democracy.
Thank you. Thank you to Carol and Patrick and Christina for coming out this morning and sharing some information. And if you want to get more information, you can reach out to one of them or to me, and we'll get you what you want. Before I ask David and Kay to come up here and help me with the updates and the question, I wanted to acknowledge Cynthia Ball is here from the North Carolina General Assembly. She represents and she just wanted to ask her to give a short update on where we are with the maps and the redistricting for the General Assembly. So.
We have a map that's going to be useful for me.
Oh, okay. All right.
Don't hide the map.
Are you all tired of hearing about maps? Many of us are. We are expecting any moment this week a response from the Supreme Court on the latest iteration of the changes to the legislative maps. On Friday, yesterday, the plaintiffs in the Covington case. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, raise your hand. I can give you a little bit more than that, but you probably all have been following it pretty much. I'm talking about the legislative maps, not the congressional maps. They're two separate things. This is the legislative maps about districts like people like me represent. The Republican leadership, I don't like to talk too much about partisan things, but it is the Republican leadership that challenged the maps that the Fourth Circuit put forward that we were supposed to run in the fall. And let me tell you how that changes. My current district is pretty much kind of like that. I mean, I can draw it for you, but you get the sense. It goes up to 540, not quite, I went too far, more like this. District 49, many of you are currently in my district, but in the new district, you may not be. The new district, which is actually much more compact, which is one reason I think many people think that the courts will accept that change. Not that my district was one that was ruled unconstitutional, but I bordered a district that was, so therefore mine had to change. My current district is sort of shaped like this, and Greer Martin picked up sort of the inside and then the outside of my district. So now what's going to happen, if those maps are approved, and we believe the Supreme Court will, is my district will be more like this and go out towards Cary, and Greer Martin will have this part of the district that I previously had, as well as some of his current parts. Any quick questions? I don't want to take up too much time. But again, yes?
How do you feel about the change?
I think the change is much more what it should be like. It was district, for example, early voting last time at Lake Lynn. I stood at early voting a good part of the time that was open. And let me get Lynn. This is Lynn Road. Lynn Road, you could go from Greer Martin's district to my district, to Greer Martin's district to my district, to Joe John's district.
Yes.
On the same road, because of the way it was shaped. That again, mine was sort of shaped like that, Greer's like this, with hooking up the outside of mine, and then Joe John's was out here. You could literally go through. It's much more compact, retaining about 40,000 of my current registered, well, not necessarily voting, but registered voters, and we'll have pick up about 40,000 that are not currently in my district.
Yes.
So the Board of Elections has also had a very interesting year. You're pretty confident if the ruling comes down on the 7th or 8th, that they would be able to still support this filing on the 12th or decent shape and prepared for the special master Massachusetts reference?
Confident. That's not something I've felt a whole lot of, David, as far as how to predict things, but there is a rumor that, again, the Republican leadership may, in our session that's supposed to start this coming Wednesday night or Thursday morning, we're going to convene third Wednesday night. We may or may not have votes, but we're expected to have votes on Thursday. Then one of the things that may be on the calendar is moving the filing back and the primary back. Not necessarily because of the legislative districts, but perhaps. But the additional thing that's recently happened, and I won't go on too much, but I know you all are confused. I am, and I deal with it every day. The judicial maps, remember they're still talking about perhaps redoing the judicial districts all across the state. There was a ruling this past week by the courts that taking away judicial primaries in both the all of the statewide judicial races was ruled unconstitutional. And therefore, some believe that by doing that, there's a chance, since we're butting up real quickly to the filing period, that they would have an excuse that the public would accept more readily to move the filing back a bit, because that's been somewhat unclear. Did that answer your question? Okay. But most of us believe, and I believe even the Republican leadership believes, that the stay that they have requested of the U.S. Supreme Court will not be granted. They have even said that. Now, whether they appeal that, yet to be determined, but even an appeal, most people believe, will not work its way through the courts. This case, by the way, has been since 2012. That's how long it took to work its way through. So I don't think anybody really believes that even if an appeal is filed by the Republican leadership, that will change what we do in the fall as far as our districts, and that the court will rule that we run in the district that I just explained to you. Thank you.
Good, Cynthia. David and Katie, y'all want to come up? We'll give a little update on what's happening on City Council. While they're coming up here, let me just mention one other thing. Since nobody was here representing the Glenwood CAC leadership, I forgot I'm supposed to announce, and there are some flyers in the back. The Glenwood CAC is having a pollination celebration on Saturday, April 28th from 10 to 2. And if anybody can come, you don't have to be in the Glenwood CAC. If you're interested, there are some flyers in the back.
What kind of celebration?
Pollination.
Pollination, oh.
Yeah. And so joining me today, we have Kay Crowder, who represents District D on the City Council, and David Cox, who represents District B on the City Council, and I'm delighted that they're here. We do have City Council meetings coming up this Tuesday at 1 o'clock and at 7 o'clock, and if you're on my mailing list, you got an email yesterday with an agenda and some of the issues that are going to be highlighted. Some things that are coming up include public hearings on several rezoning cases, including Overland Village application for a historical overlay district, North Hills Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, and a few other items, several rezonings. Another thing, a couple of things I wanted to mention. Several of you have spoken with me about leaf collection, and certainly there's been a lot of chatter on Nextdoor and other places. We have had some problems with leaf collection. Many years ago, the city went from 3 collections a year to 2. This year in particular, we had a lot of problems with leaf collection due to the weather and due to some maintenance issues with equipment. My understanding is the 3rd and final leaf collection is in process. We brought I brought this up at a recent work session because I've gotten so many complaints, because as I think all of you have seen, the huge piles of leaves that have remained in the road for months that are safety hazards for traffic, for people trying to walk, kids riding bikes, and then of course when it rains, a lot of it gets washed into the sewer and it causes environmental hazards. So we're going to be taking a look at our next budget work session about what our options are in terms of how we deal with that. Couple of other things. Every week, the city manager has been sending out an update to city council members. A lot of times it's a follow-on from things that are brought up at city council meetings, and it's just updates on various things that might be of interest. Starting next Monday, not the 5th, but the 12th, those will be posted on the city website, so you'll be able to read those for yourself and be better informed about what's going on and, you know, learn, you know, what we're doing across the city. It's an effort to promote more citizen engagement and get you all the information that you need to be well-informed citizens.
No, it's about transparency.
That too, yes. And then we're also taking a look at piloting a program so that parking will be free in the city lot if you're coming to a city council meeting. And again, a lot of people have mentioned that it's, you know, a bit of a financial burden to have to pay to park when you're coming to city council meetings. And so we're going to test that out for a while. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to start, but we'll let you know. And hopefully that will be an opportunity for more people to attend and to see what's going on. Of course, you can also watch it on TV, either live or afterwards. But if you want to come down and speak or just participate live, you'll have that opportunity without having to pay for parking.
So can I say just something to that? So, you know, council members, when they get, I'll stand up. Council members, when they come on council, especially new council members, which is so exciting, they usually bring with them things that they would like to get done, that they've seen over a time that needed to be done. I will say kudos to Steff for moving forward the free parking in the parking garages for people who want to engage in their civic community, being able to do that for free as it relates to parking. And also to her point about manager's update, which is the things that we ask for at the council table usually, and they will say to us, we'll do it in the manager's update. It has not been transparent to you. And Steff really felt like in her last 2 years of spending a lot of time at the council before she was elected, that was an important thing to be made available to you. So I will say kudos that those were two of the things that she's brought forward and that we've been able to move forward in the process.
Thanks, Kay. And I would just encourage everyone, if there are barriers to your participation or you're feeling well informed about what's going on, let me know or let any of your council members know. Patrick.
Well, I just have to make the statement then. Can you please move critical commission meetings to the evening when the public can attend? Decisions are being made. Attorneys and developers, it's their job to be participating during the daytime. The citizens can't. Most of them work.
So can I speak to that? Okay. Since I've been there the longest, I guess, which isn't that long. So we have made some strides in making some advances. Part of the issue is that sometimes the chairs of the different, for example, the Planning Commission, Eric and I've had numerous conversations about this, have been a little bit pushed back about it. And the Planning Commission in itself has the Committee of the Whole, the text change committees that meet, as well as the Planning Commission. So trying to navigate his schedule amongst 8 members to make sure he gets a quorum each time, which has been difficult for him, which is to another point I'll take up, is challenging. I will say that the council members, David, certainly myself, Russ, and I'm sure Steff will speak up on that, are making strides to make sure that we get them in a place where more people can participate. Can we do it for all of them? No. Parks in particular already do theirs in the evening. I think they start at 5 or 5:30 because they want more participation from citizens because parks are so much a part of what we do for citizens. So I do think that the new council reflection is to make things a little bit more centered towards citizens as well as the development community. And I would say that that's not always been the case, but there has been a little bit of a shift. So we will strive to try to make some of those things happen because we hear it a lot. We really do.
Yeah, and I will just say, before I got on council, at the beginning of every planning commission meeting, there's an opportunity for any citizen to speak about whatever they want to speak about. And I have asked them to consider switching their 9 o'clock meetings to 4 o'clock. So far, I have gotten pushback on that too about quorums. And I think Eric Braun, who's the chair of the planning commission, is making a more concerted effort when people apply to be on planning commission to ask them about their schedules and their availabilities, because we do have a lot of boards and commissions that citizens can serve on and that we want citizens to serve on, and I think a lot of people understand what a true commitment it is and that they need to attend the meetings and do their homework and participate fully. I think, unfortunately, there are a few people who think, oh, I'll be on a board and commission and I can put that on my resume and, doesn't that sound nice, but I don't really have to do anything. And there aren't many people like that, but I think there are a few. Or there are people who just don't realize the time commitment and aren't able to keep up with it. So if any of you are interested in serving on boards and commissions, we regularly have openings come up. And it's a great way, again, to get involved, to learn the inner workings of how things are happening and how you can influence them. So again, if you're interested, talk to me, email me, and we'll see what we can do. What other things do we have coming up that we want to talk about?
Well, I would like to.
Yeah.
The one thing I would like to say about, let's take the planning commission, for example.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes. Let's take the planning commission as the primary example. They meet at 9 a.m. and that is a hardship for people. So we've been pushing for several years to move those meetings to some other time, like later in the afternoon, perhaps 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And as Kay mentioned, some of the pushback is it's not convenient for the schedules of the members on the planning commission. So it's a chicken and egg thing. I think what we have to do is say, make a commitment that yes, we're going to move those meetings. It won't be tomorrow, but we should set a date at a point in the future when we can expect that the planning commission meetings will begin happening at, say, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Those people are on the planning commission that can meet that schedule, welcome to stay on the planning commission. But if you can't meet that schedule, then you should obviously leave the planning commission and allow other people to come in that can meet that schedule. So it's not something that we have to flip a switch and do it tomorrow. But I do think that we on council could make the commitment that we will have these meetings at a more convenient time for citizens at some point in the future and begin planning for a transition. So that's really what I wanted to say.
I do an attaboy on that.
Yes, me too. Question, yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for your thoughtfulness about citizen access. It's a really heartening conversation to hear. One thought is that I really appreciate hearing about reminding us that we can come speak to City Council. I know there's a 2-week period that you have to sign up in advance. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility for changing that. Things move so quickly here in the city, and it's challenging it's just challenging to do that 2 weeks in advance. I know at the Wake County School Board you can just show up and sign up. So I'm wondering if there's a reason why that rule is in place and if there's a possibility.
They don't have as much to deal with as we do. That's logistically, that's one of the reasons.
That's helpful.
But I think what we can do is take sort of a hybrid approach. We would give preference to people who do sign up 2 weeks in advance. But I think we should have something so that as people come in, and maybe it's a cutoff, maybe it's the day before, maybe it's 2 days before, but it doesn't have to be 2 weeks. Or maybe it's the same day. People come in and they put their name on the list. Well, if there's time, we can get to you. Otherwise, come back in 2 weeks, okay? So perhaps having an option to sign up on the day of a council meeting Again, we're going to give preference to the people that sign up in advance. And you're on the list at that point. If there's time, you can speak. If not, then come back in 2 weeks. So I think there are a lot of options, a range of options that we can consider. I do think what we do have today is a little too rigid.
I will say to David's point, I do agree with some of what David's saying, but I will say to you, with the amount of material that comes in for us to see as council members over a 2-week period of time, one of the things the council would have to decide is logistically, how much are we willing to push off to have that more level of participation, how much more are we willing to push off on the other things that are on our docket that might need to move so that we give ample time. So it's not just that, but it is moving logistically a big schedule of events that happen in one given council meeting. I mean, I'm personally opposed to us loading our evening with 8 or 9 rezoning cases. And I'll be honest with you, by the time it gets to be 10 o'clock and you've been there since 1 that day, you get kind of tired, and I mean, I'm like in shutdown mode. So I don't feel like we give those last cases probably the scrutiny they deserve. Because there's so much. So logistically, we'd have to really adapt our scheduling for our meetings. So I hear you, but it is more than just that one thing that we'd have to change. That's not saying it can't be done. It's just moving it a bigger agenda. Yes, ma'am.
The reason I like the 2 weeks, I know you did, is it gives you a time to look at what we're talking about. Planning, because you have so much on your docket, and we come down there and we say something, you're sitting there like, what is she talking about? So maybe a week, it would be a compromise, but the day of, no, I would not want to present something and you not know what I'm presenting, and I'm wasting my time and your time. So a compromise might be a week, maybe 10 days, but I'd rather have you prepared on the issue that I'm coming to present than not be prepared.
So to Steff's point, we can push that in our consent, in our agenda when we get to talk about it at the table, but I will say to you, it always helps for citizens to come down in a citizen petition and ask us to make these changes, because what it does, it gives us validation or a springboard for having more conversation amongst the body about how to move that forward. It just gives it a greater sense of urgency that it needs to be dealt with. And I would encourage you to do that.
And you can, if you go to raleighnc.gov, you can type in citizen petition in the search engine, and it will bring up the form that you need to fill out.
We recently, as a group, wanted to get something in front of the council and went through a citizen petition process. But as I recall, you have to do it in person and fill out paper down at the city clerk's office. Is it possible to do online?
I believe so.
Well, you have to print it out. I don't think you can fill it out online. You have to print it out and fill it in. And
you can email it.
You can email it in, you can
Or
scan
fax
an
it.
email or fax it.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we need to, city needs to move some of that form online. I wouldn't be, that's not that much. Just think about it.
You're right. You're right.
I think that might be very frustrating over the years to have to be constantly.
So Sarah, so just so you'll know, one of the things that certainly the three of us are talking about, and certain other council members are, one of the last pillars of our strategic plan that we adopted, I think 7 years ago, the last pillar that we haven't done anything with yet is organizational excellence. And it has been something that I keep talking about over and over and over again for the last 6 months, and I think I'm starting to get buy-in as to why this is an important pillar at the end of our strategic plan to address. To some of all of your concerns, where we need to critically look at what we are doing as an organization as it relates to excellence amongst employees, how they interface with you, how our systems work, how could we make our systems better. So we're going to have a retreat in February, and organizational excellence is at the top of my list of things we have to talk about. Now, we do not have total buy-in by all the council members. So it will be a selling that we have to do, but it will give us the opportunity to look at the things that you guys are talking about in mulch different places, different items, but still related to the same thing of making sure that we are developing an organizational excellence protocol for how we move forward with the city growing and technology growing at the rate it is for the city of Raleigh.
Small point, it's the 21st century.
Yes, we hear you.
Small
Yes.
point, the mission statement of the city council is we're a 21st century city of innovation, so.
It is, and we
should
have,
not be that hard to get.
well, I hear you, I agree with this. We did make that statement. We all agree that if you're going to make that statement, organizational excellence has to be one of the pillars that we now tackle. So we hear you, we do.
I'm concerned about the traffic planning process in the city. I think we've heard in 2016, I think there was a survey, and I think traffic was the area of the city that citizens were the least happy with, and yet all I read about is traffic calming, which to me means unnecessary four-way stop signs and speed bumps and reducing the number of lanes, and we just passed a big bond issue, which is going to cause my tax to go up $700 a year, and I'm very concerned that that money is going to be spent on projects to make it worse and not better. There are other ways you can slow traffic, like post a speed limit. A lot of these areas where people are concerned about how fast people are driving, the speed limit is not posted, such as on Harmon Drive and St. Albans. And they have, the city will have a policy, it's 35 unless it's posted. Well, on some streets like Atlantic Avenue, there's 12 different speed zones as you go from North Raleigh down. They're executing it incompetently. I think our traffic planners really need to be held accountable. One neighborhood, we drive through everybody's neighborhoods to get from one place to another, go across North Raleigh, and yet people on one street can say, I'm going to have you slow everybody down here because of my perception that somebody's not doing well. It's a crazy system, and I think there needs to be better planning, and particularly if we want to go after Amazon, and goodness gracious, we can't hardly plan what we're doing, and if we get something like Amazon, our current planning system will be absolutely overwhelmed.
You're right. Traffic planning is a concern of mine. I live in North Raleigh. I live near the Bedford area. And District B is really northeast Raleigh, beginning at the Beltline, going all the way to Capitol Boulevard. Through Capitol Boulevard runs to the middle of it, so it goes all the way to the border with Wake Forest. And one of the things that's come to my attention recently is, like in the mornings, for example, 540 is essentially a parking lot in the morning with all the traffic. And we need better transportation planning. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of North Raleigh and Northern Wake County, because there's explosive growth happening in Northern Wake County, in places like Wake Forest and Rollsville, and even in places like Youngsville. Very rapid growth. Roseville, I think, is the fastest growing community in North Carolina. When you look at the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, for example, 540 is there. And there is a plan to provide another east-west route, an improved NC 98. But the plan doesn't call for that, the estimated completion for that is year 2040. So it's 22 years in the future. Okay? So growth is happening today. It's going to continue to happen at a rapid pace over the next 20 years. And we have to reset our priorities. We have to make some of these things higher priority. NC 98 is a 2-lane road right now. People want to be able to get from their homes to RTP. They want to go to Durham. They want to go to Chapel Hill to work and shop. And so we need to readjust our priorities. And I completely agree with you. Now, the $200 million that was in our bond, most of that money is going to go towards street improvements. Okay, so for example, Atlantic Avenue, I drive down Atlantic Avenue a lot from North Raleigh to go into the city. And so when you get to New Hope Church Road, it narrows down significantly. So there's going to be a chunk of money that's going to go in to widening that section of road on Atlantic Avenue and putting in sidewalks on both sides of the road. So those are the kinds of improvements that we're going to make. And we can certainly take a look at things like, and I'm well aware because I go down Atlantic Avenue, of the changing speed limits. I'm cruising along at 45 and now suddenly it's 35, you know.
Well, you know, they came to, with a plan, the North Hills, where they actually were not, they projected no improvement in traffic flow after spending all the money on the 6 Forks Road corridor, because people didn't want to make a wide street there, and yet if you don't do something to improve traffic flow, it's just going to be a nightmare. So there's real conflict between the people who want to slow traffic down and the people who want to get to where they need to go to get to work, to get to school.
Well, this is going to be one of the challenges for the city as the city grows. So, for example, this past week I met with the city transportation department. What you don't know, I mean, we like our city, we like our neighborhoods, we like the tree-lined streets. But the plan really for north of Raleigh is to widen most of the streets to 6 lanes. Now, if you go down Capitol Boulevard, which is 6 lanes, we can see what the result is of unplanned growth. Okay, and the question is, do we want to replicate that throughout the city? Do we want to take every road that's currently 4 lanes and widen it to 6 lanes?
Thoroughfares.
And make large thoroughfares for cars. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what are our priorities? Are we here for neighborhoods and for people, or are we here simply to move vehicles from point A to point B? And to what extent, if we're going to keep the roads narrow and we're going to have tree-lined streets, then what's the alternative for moving people around? And part of it is getting people to live closer to where they work and they shop and they go to school, and also to be able to use public transit to be able to move around and to walk. Because there are limits to how many people can actually live in the city and drive cars. And we see that today in cities like Atlanta and New York City and Boston. Okay.
Atlanta. Atlanta is a disaster.
Yeah. Can I speak to the Amazon, to your point about Amazon? So I've been at some levels of discussion about Amazon as it relates to the chamber and to the greater chamber, who are certainly pushing forward to that. I think personally for Amazon, I think they've probably already made a decision, but this is a great marketing ploy to keep their name out there and keep it exciting. And hey, I don't disagree with that factor. But I will say to you that if an Amazon should decide to come to a city like Raleigh, what usually happens when they go into a city is they usually come in and go, what would it take to get your transportation system up to the place that we need it to be? And what we have to talk about at that point is what kind of partnership agreement are we willing to do with them, with their money and our money. And in this case, it will be the whole county. It wouldn't be just Raleigh. It would be the whole county. That is usually how Amazon chooses an area and comes in and talks about it if you get down to that short list of about 5. So they in particular are very open to trying to get the transportation needs if they should decide on a city that they don't think quite meets their mark, but are still interested about what those partnerships look like together.
And one thing I will just say is, when I was running for this seat, I talked about, I believed in responsible development that was compatible with existing neighborhoods, environmentally sensitive, and that had appropriate infrastructure in place. And that's still my guiding principle. So when somebody comes to us with a rezoning request or something that we need to act on, I will always be looking at those 3 factors. And frankly, some of the rezonings and increased density, I need to understand what the plans are for managing the traffic that's going to result from that increased density, or I'm going to have a lot of trouble supporting it. So that's
Can we say one thing too, just so you'll know, because you've been reading a little bit about it in the paper, and I don't think the city has gotten the credit it needs to get for this, but because I think it was in last week's paper, but in the Wake County Transit Plan, there is there's the push for free fares for students 18 and below for free.
Kay is responsible.
I don't think we get enough credit for that, but I do want to say that if the Wake Transit Plan should decide not to fund it, which I hope that doesn't happen, I did get a commitment from the city of Raleigh that if the Wake County Transit Plan should not decide to fund it, that the city of Raleigh would fund the Wake Transit Plan.
Also, seniors can
Yeah.
ride for you.
They get to ride.
And I just like, since I've been at this for 30 years, I'd like to say just one thing, particularly about traffic. What this council has inherited is a patchwork that people put together based on somebody's best idea at the time. And you know, there's a famous saying, you know, we thought it was a good idea at the time, right? Okay, so you've got constrictions in all of these, like Atlantic Avenue. Okay, you know, to change that, it takes a phenomenal amount of money because of the railroads and everything else. So we are not talking cookie cutter money here, guys. We're talking very serious. And I was very concerned when they said they were going to try and bring Amazon in here because, you know, that, you're right, they'll bring money, but they're, you know, how they're going to come up with it, of course, they got plenty of money, but we don't, okay? And you guys don't like to raise taxes, and I don't like you to raise taxes. So you know, you're going to have to, there's going to have to be a little bit of give and take on this one. This is, you know, I'd love to have them here because I think this is a great place, and there's plenty of territory left. You look at the map, plenty of territory left.
They need
Okay.
45 contiguous acres.
Yeah, there's plenty of territory. So you know, I'm just saying, you know, have at, but it's going to be painful, and you know, I don't, you know, somebody's going to have to really bite the bullet because you've got all these constrictions on all these highways coming in, and you know, there's nothing you can do. They're built that way because that's the way we wanted it when we started.
Question back
You know, good point. I have lots of people that want to engage with council and talk. You guys have a lot of reports to read. You're engaged with all these different departments. You're very busy people. It's basically almost a full-time job now based on the size of the city. So one of the concerns I have is sort of goes with Christina in representation and engaging people. If you look around and you're somewhat self-aware, 45 and up is true. So why doesn't City Council consider a $30,000 a year job that would make running for council and participating an option for somebody in their 30s or 40s? I mean, I'm not saying $35,000 is a huge income, but at least you can function, especially if you're married, with that level. You guys are doing the work. I mean, I think you deserve, but then it should be considered what you're doing, which is basically a full-time job. And I think that would open it up for more people to at least engage in leadership positions, because currently we're about 75% baby boomers on the council. I think that's, everybody, it's great that people come out and vote and they're active, but there really is a generational gap right now in the leadership in the city. And, you know, again, I'm glad that everybody comes out. It'd be nice if this was a balanced audience.
Yeah, you raise a very good point, and it's been brought up to me by a number of different people. Earlier this morning were talking to me about that. Right now, the way it works, it essentially is a full-time job, and you really can't afford to do it unless you have if you are employed, you have a very understanding employer, or you're retired, or you know, you get money from somewhere else. So we are leaving out a huge portion of our population who can't afford to be represented on city council, and I just think that is wrong. And you know, of course, you know, I don't want to stand up here and say, oh, I need a salary of this to be on council. I'm not meaning to be self-serving about it, but you're absolutely right. We are cutting out a huge portion of our population, and we don't have the right representation because of that. And I'm not sure what we can do about it. I know that at the last council meeting of the last council, a proposal was put forward to make these 4-year terms instead of 2-year terms, which also may help a little bit, because having to run for office every 2 years is a major time sink, if you will. And so I think those are the kinds of things that we need to wrestle with as we grow as a city and as we, you know, become more serious about managing our growth and doing it in the right way.
I will say to you also, too, to your point, part of it is participation as well. Sometimes what you find in young people is they have a lot of other things going on, and things haven't really affected them yet in the point where perhaps they bought a home and their taxes go up or this goes up. as something happens in their neighborhood and it engages them, it gets them started in realizing what it takes to make a city the place you want to live and raise children in. So that's one aspect too. If you start to pay the council, I think one of the things that we have to talk about at that point is term limits. Because I don't think we want to get council members who run because they can make $30,000 or $35,000 a year and keep doing that for a long period of time. So I think if you should decide that it becomes a paid position, and I'm certainly not going either way on it, and I will go whichever way the body decides, but I will say that you probably then need to look at longer terms and probably term limits. Because what you watch going on at the federal level is where people go in pretty level of one place, and then when they leave after 38 years, there's a completely different lifestyle for them. So I would say that that would be others. So it's not just one thing, it's really a multitude of things we have to look at.
Great idea.
Another aspect to this too is that when you go down to City Hall, in one of the hallways, there are pictures of all the former city councils. And the thing that has struck me.
All men.
Among other things.
The number has stayed the same. Okay, so even though the city's population has quadrupled within people's lifetime, we still have 5 district councilors. And I mean, is it unreasonable to maybe we talk about our CACs being too large? Is it possible that we should have more districts in the city? Perhaps go from 5 to 10 districts in the city and increase the representation on our city council.
David, that's a big job. You want to do some selling.
Who would redraw those districts?
Usually they're done by census and geographical growth patterns.
But who would sign off on it?
Well, would probably end up I will go back to this. The city growing at 68 people moving to Wake County every day, and the larger portion of those 68 living in the Raleigh proper, we are experiencing incredible growth pains. We all feel it. I know you're not going to believe this. I had my policy analyst just keep a tally one day. I get about 661 emails every day. That's just emails. That's just emails. So we have, not to mention all the stuff we read that we have to read to keep up. So that's just just one little link in how much is done in a day to keep us on top of what's going on in our districts. And then there are some of us, David and I, and I'm sure Steff, who get more than probably the average because we tend to reach out to try to help people in other districts as well. So it is a lot of, and I take it on. Look, I run and I don't mind. I'm not complaining. I'm willing to do it and I like doing it. I like serving. But it is a lot of information that comes at us in a day.
Yeah, I will echo that. Before I retired, I worked at Glaxo for almost 20 years, and I thought I got a lot of email in that capacity. And when I was running for this office, I used to say, if you email me, you'll hear back from me probably within 5 or 10 minutes, but for sure within 24 hours. Well, you're still going to hear from me in 24 hours, but I have just been blown away by the email volume. And it is, again, I'm not complaining. I'm happy to hear from people, and I'm glad to help people when I can. But it was a real eye-opener to me as to, how intense that would be.
But you're all of
staff. You need enough staff to support you.
Yeah, again, back to organizational excellence. But I will say to you, all of you are important to us. And we want to serve you all. We want to do a good job. Work with us. Come see us. Talk to us. Come to council. Do citizens partitions to help us get where we need to be. And I do think right now, guys, we have a council that's really willing to push forward some things that need to be pushed forward. So I think the next 2 years are an excellent time to get some of these things done, because I think there's a willingness on this council to work together. And even though we feel differently about some issues, finding compromise to find things that we can do to move it along. I really do. I'm encouraged by that. We're having a retreat, and I was talking to people and they were like, I'm like, I'm encouraged by the retreat. There's going to be some good things that happen. I mean, we're going to look at things from a high level and then try to decide, agree on principles, and then be disciplined in our approach to get there. That's what I'm pushing.
I'll vote for that. Any other questions?
Thank you so much for allowing me to come. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have been live streaming this. I'm not sure where exactly you're going to be able to watch, but as soon as I find out, I will let you know. Our next meeting is March 3rd at Briar Creek at 10 o'clock. There are lots of donuts in the back. I do not want to eat them, so please take a donut with you. And thank you all again for coming out. Thanks to Christina for doing the live stream.